Let me start with the idea of a modern origin story. So what are origin stories? By origin stories, I mean stories that try to bring together everything that is known in a particular community and bring them together in a form that is teachable and engaging so that knowledge can be passed on from generation to generation. Now, as far as we know, all human societies have taught origin stories. They were probably being taught 100,000 years ago in Paleolithic communities in Africa. They lie at the heart of all the great religious traditions, at the heart of Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Confucianism, all these traditions. At their heart, there is an origin story. And what they do is they bring together all the knowledge of that society, and they provide a sort of universal mapping so that you can identify your place in time and space. So you can say, this is what I am, this is who I am, this is what I'm part of. The trouble is that modern schools don't teach such a story. And I actually think that's dangerous in all sorts of ways. It creates what the sociologist Emile Durkheim called a sense of anomie. And Durkheim's first book was on suicide. And he argued that anomie, not knowing what you're part of, not having a map that you can put yourself on, can drive people to suicide because it deprives them of a sense of meaning and purpose. So having these maps is immensely important. Modern schools don't teach them, and I think that's a very dangerous thing. They fail to teach us what we're part of. Let me try to, here's a very simple graphic that I hope gives some sense of what I mean by the mapping. And I think it's something that, again, is familiar to every Montessori teacher. So we have the self. At the center is the self. But the self is part of a family. You identify with a family. Then beyond the family is the village or clan or maybe the workplace or the school you work for. Then beyond that is your nation or your religion or your civilization. Now that is an identity that modern schools teach very well. Every school everywhere in the world teaches you about your national identity and the history of the national community you belong to. And I have to say that personally, I think it's time to move on from that community, because in a world with nuclear weapons, it seems to me, and I remember the Cuban Missile Crisis as a school kid, it seems to me crazy in a world with nuclear weapons to be telling young people that their primary commitment is to their nation. Beyond the nation, there is the next identity. I'm struggling a bit with this, I'm struggling a bit with this pointer. It's not always moving. Beyond the nation, there is the identity of humanity, the community of humanity. Now, that is not an identity or a community that we teach about. I don't know of any school anywhere in the world that has, or university that has courses on the history of humanity. And yet, I'm deeply convinced that it's possible to construct them. And in fact, I think Big History does that. To construct those histories, and they can be as inspiring, as exciting, as interesting as the great national histories. But of course, governments have very little interest in funding histories of humanity. So there's that community. Then beyond that, there's the community of the biosphere and the earth. We're living organisms. We're part of a community of billions of living organisms that has evolved over 4 billion years. The biosphere created us. We evolved from other living organisms. They are our kin, as genetics has shown us. So there's that community of planet Earth. And then beyond that, there's the universe and the cosmos. Now, all these identities are embedded in each other. And each identity can be understood more richly and more deeply and more profoundly if you see how it links to other identities. Now, there's something else that links with this. To understand all these identities, to see this mapping properly, you have to be willing to look at many different disciplines and see the links between them. So the way disciplines are compartmentalized in modern education doesn't help here. So we need to see the links between disciplines. So here's another quick, this is a very crude graphic, but I hope it makes the point. So there's the individual, there's me. I can think of psychology as the discipline that studies me as an individual. Beyond that, the sociology or anthropology, it discovers me in groups. Then beyond that, there's history or global studies, which study me as part of a global community. Then beyond that, there's biology, studies of the biosphere, the environment, earth sciences, planetary sciences that study the history of planet Earth, and then astronomy, and finally, cosmology. So to understand these different mappings, we need to understand many different disciplines and see the links between them. And again, I think modern education is so compartmentalized, it makes it difficult to see these links, and big history tries to bring out these links.